Welcome to RMTC-DHH's series on the high leverage practices for students with disabilities. In this video, we will be discussing the 10th high leverage practice from the CEC and CEEDAR Center's publication, High Leverage Practices in Special Education. This video was made in collaboration with the Florida Positive Behavioral Interventions and Supports Project, or Florida PBIS. HLP10 states, conduct functional behavioral assessments, FBAs, to develop individual student behavior support plans. Previously in HLP9, we discussed teaching social behaviors and how students who are deaf or hard of hearing may need explicit instruction in social behaviors due to language barriers. What happens when you have a student and after providing Tier 1, whole class, and Tier 2, small group interventions, they still struggle behaviorally? This leads us to HLP10 and conducting FBAs. First, let's define behavior. Behavior is not only what we say or do, but also what we think or feel. All behavior serves a purpose, and all behavior is communication. First, let's look at this through the lens of the multi-tiered System of Supports, MTSS process, as described by the Florida Problem Solving Response to Intervention Project. Step 1. Problem identification. What is occurring? Step 2. Problem analysis. Why is the problem occurring? Step 3. Instruction or intervention design. What are we going to do about it? And Step 4, response to intervention, or RTI. Is what we decided to do working? Now, you might be thinking, why do I need to do MTSS? My students already have IEPs. Well, remember, MTSS does not END with IEPs. In other words, highly effective teachers should constantly be analyzing their practice through progress monitoring to ensure instruction and intervention is affecting student outcomes. In order to identify the problem, you must follow the ABCs of behavior. A. Antecedent. The antecedent is what occurs immediately before the problem behavior. For example, the teacher instructs the students to turn to a page in their textbook and read silently to themselves. B. Behavior. The student engages in the behavior in an observable and measurable way. For example, after the teacher gives the directions, the student immediately disengages by putting his head down. C. Consequence. The consequence is the event or response that follows the behavior. For example, the teacher then asks the student to leave the class. Some examples of antecedents that may trigger students who are DHH are when they don't have access to the teacher's face during instruction, whether that be because the teacher turns around and writes on the board while speaking, or walks in front of the projector and the light blurs her face. Another example is when a student who is DHH misses a joke or comment and peers tell them, "Oh, I'll tell you later." Another example is when a teacher or peer talks to the interpreter instead of directly to them. Students who are deaf or hard of hearing may demonstrate behaviors that are unique or different from their hearing peers when faced with antecedents that cause frustration or communication breakdown. Behaviors to consider are withdrawing or refusal to engage in conversation. Students who are DHH also experience thoughts or feelings of frustration, often as a result of events that may be difficult for others to perceive or relate to. They also may engage in aggressive behaviors as a way to communicate. Often when we hear the word consequences, we think it references a negative response. Consequences are essentially a response, either positive or negative, to a given action. A consequence is any response in the environment to a behavior and does not need to be given out by another person. Consequences will strengthen behavior or reinforce, or weaken behavior or punish. There are 4 types of consequences or 4 quadrants to the operant conditioning theory: positive reinforcement, positive punishment, negative reinforcement, and negative punishment. Examples of natural consequences of behaviors are when you eat, you are no longer hungry. That would be a negative reinforcement. Or when you touch your hand to a hot pan, you get burned. That would be positive punishment. So we know how to identify the problem using the behavior ABCs. Let's talk about analyzing the problem. We must ask ourselves, why is the problem occurring? All functions of behavior fall within 2 categories: to get/obtain, or to avoid/escape. These are the only functions supported by research. The student can be looking to get or obtain attention from peers or adults, a tangible thing or activity like time on the tablet, or some kind of sensory stimulation like pressure, lights, sound. The same could be said of a child looking to avoid or escape. They could be trying to escape attention from peers or adults, a tangible thing or activity like worksheet problems, or some kind of sensory stimulation like loud noise from the cafeteria. The behavior occurs because of that function. When learning to implement the problem-solving process and to support the summarization of data collection during steps 1 and 2, it's important to develop a hypothesis statement. The hypothesis summarizes the ABC data, including function, and leads teams toward developing the appropriate interventions to address the problem behaviors. The template sentence provided here will help teams with hypothesis development. When antecedent occurs, student engages in behavior. As a result, she is able to whatever the function is. Now let's look at a case study and follow the steps we've discussed so far. Meet Natasha, a 5th grader who's performing on a 2nd grade reading level. She often swears, screams, and throws materials during small group reading and independency work. She is then sent to the office to calm down. Using the ABC data, let's break this down. The antecedent is she is asked to read in a small group or given an independent assignment. She then proceeds to swear, scream, and/or throw materials. Her consequence given by the teacher is sending her to the behavior specialist or sending her to the office. Now, let's come up with a hypothesis summary statement. Based on the data in steps 1 and 2, the team was able to develop this hypothesis. When Natasha is given an independent assignment or asked to read in a small group, she often swears, screams, and/or throws things. As a result, she is sent to the behavior specialist or to the office and is able to avoid the task or activity. So the function of the behavior is to avoid. Now that we identified the problem, analyzed the problem, and came up with a hypothesis, let's design effective interventions for Natasha, which is step 3 in the MTSS process. Effective interventions and a behavior intervention plan should be connected to that hypothesis statement and function that the team developed. A well-written plan should include strategies to prevent the behavior from occurring, the antecedents, teaching replacement or desired behaviors, and strategies to reinforce the new skills. Using the ABC data that we have gathered to create our hypothesis, let's break down how we can prevent the undesirable behavior from occurring. So So if Natasha is given an independent reading assignment or asked to work in a small group, some strategies to prevent the behavior are for the teacher of the deaf or hard of hearing, gen ed teacher, or ESC teacher pre-teaching the vocabulary or previewing the book. Next, we will teach replacement behaviors. The current behavior of Natasha is screaming and throwing materials. Remember, the function of that behavior is to avoid. The replacement behavior we want to teach is to request a break. Remember, the replacement behavior has to meet the function of the behavior. So, if our hypothesis is correct and the function is to avoid, then an appropriate replacement behavior could be to request a break. In conjunction with teaching the replacement behavior, we want to make sure that we are strengthening that new behavior with reinforcement. The reinforcement for the replacement behavior needs to serve the same or similar function, which is to avoid. We taught a more appropriate way for Natasha to escape or avoid the task, so when she uses the new replacement behavior of requesting a break, we should reinforce that behavior with a small break. We could also make sure that we are reinforcing other desired replacement behaviors that Natasha is displaying, such as completing the task without disrupting peers, with reinforcers that serve the same function. You could let her select from a menu of choices, such as opting out of 2 questions, completing only even or odd, or reading with a peer buddy. All of these options allow her to avoid the undesirable task. The last step in the cycle is to progress monitor the response to the intervention that you chose. Choose how you will progress monitor, whether that be by frequency, duration, or during an interval of time. You'll want how you progress monitor to be consistent with how you collected baseline data during the assessment. For example, if the baseline data I gathered at the beginning is that Natasha screams or yells 3 to 5 times a day, that would be frequency. If you kept track of how long that happened, it would be duration. If she engaged in screaming or yelling for 10 to 15 minutes during reading block, that would be using an interval of time. The key here is to be consistent from the initial baseline data to the progress monitoring. Progress monitoring is crucial in the instructional cycle and will help ensure that the intervention that you designed is being implemented with fidelity. Knowing if the student is not showing any progress or is regressing will let you know that adjustments and intervention need to be made, or perhaps the hypothesis was incorrect. Knowing if the student is progressing will let you know that the strategies are successful. Progress monitoring will help ensure that the steps in the MTSS process are being followed with fidelity. We will leave you with this point to ponder. Using a case study, we want you to follow the steps in the MTSS process to identify the problem, analyze the problem, design an intervention, and determine what kind of data you will use and how often you will record that data to progress monitor the response to the intervention you designed. Jim, a 4th grade student who is profoundly deaf, has been reported of frequently interjecting in group discussions at inappropriate times through the use of his interpreter. The general education teacher has had several discussions with Jim and the interpreter to wait until called on before asking a question or making a statement. Using this case study, identify the problem, analyze the problem by creating a hypothesis summary statement, design an intervention to replace a behavior, and decide how you will progress monitor to ensure the intervention is effective. Come to the TA Live discussion to learn how your colleagues address this, and share your thoughts to collaborate together. Remember to check out additional resources in the Live Binder. You can access the Live Binder on the RMTC-DHH TA Live website, or by going to the bit.ly bit.ly/RMTC-HLP. Can't make it to the discussion session? Or perhaps you're watching a recording of this at a later time. An idea to still work within your district is to visit the Iris Center HLP Interactive Alignment Tool. This tool identifies which Iris resource provides information on each specific HLP. Where can you find the information for the Iris Center? If you guessed the live binder, you are right. Remember, you can find that at bit.ly/RMTC-HLP. To watch more videos about the HLPs, make sure you check out the TA Live archive and our video library. Until next time, we'll see you around. This presentation was funded by the Florida Department of Education, Bureau of Exceptional Education and Student Services through federal assistance under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, Part B funds. The information included does not reflect any specific endorsement by any parties involved.